Hey y'all, this is Phil from the future coming to you hot off the heels from my conversation with Travis. Travis is an interesting conversation. Our conversation with Travis is interesting, I should say, because he is currently going through a serious life struggle, a struggle that we wouldn't want anyone to have to go through, and he himself is taking it on. And I would have to say that he's taking it on the best that he can, and he seems to be doing just fine. He's treading the waters of life, and we talk about it. We talk about how he's able to kind of keep on swimming, what's pushing him through this process, and above all, where he is finding meaning, purpose, and belonging, or in other words, what his spiritual fitness is all about. This is the whole point of this podcast, y'all, is about stories like this. So sit back, relax, and enjoy another episode of the Grow Self Spiritual Fitness Podcast. Sweet. All right. Tell me, what have you been going through these last couple weeks?
Okay, so about 2 weeks ago, we went to the pediatrician, I have a son who's about 2.5 months old, and he was going to his 2-month appointment, and we ended up going to the pediatrician about 2 weeks ago. And at that point, we noticed some sense of, jaundice, which means kind of yellowing of eyes and, the body. And that is fairly actually normal for a young child. However, it seemed to not go away as much as we would have liked. So we asked the pediatrician to test his kind of levels to see how it was, like if they were high, if they were low. And then, after his 2 month, that went well. And we get a call about 2 o'clock saying, hey, his bilirubin levels, which has to do with jaundice, are higher than they should be. I recommend you going to see a GI doctor. So the next day at about 8 a.m., we went to the GI doctor with my 2.5-month-old son, and the GI doctor looked at him, and after examining him, examining different things of his body, he came to the conclusion that we needed to go to the hospital immediately. And, at that point, my wife Amy and I were extremely just concerned because we were just not sure what was going on. And he obviously was very concerned as well, which was, again, very concerning to us. So that day, so that was Tuesday, 2 weeks ago, we ended up going to the hospital pretty much immediately. So when we got there, we were greeted by about 4 doctors, and all of them, basically were like, hey, here's questions. This is what the GI doctors told us, and essentially immediately we were completely just, told, hey, he's going to need surgery pretty much immediately.
Jeez.
And the diagnosis was not confirmed, but they're like, from everything that he has, we're fairly sure he has something that's called biliary atresia. And through all of that, and again, this all happened within 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
They recited, hey, he basically his liver has not been processing food appropriately. And he has, essentially, he isn't able to process and absorb food like you and I are able to. And essentially that's damaging his liver. So they needed to, 24 hours later at 8 a.m. the next day, they got him in for surgery. And that surgery was about 4 hours. And again, this all happened within a day. And at that point, they went into his stomach and attached kind of his small intestine to his stomach or to his liver to be able to process food correctly. And the hope is that can solve the issue for a while. In addition to that, this is like, we would have never have caught this on our end. This is a disease that is 1 out of 15,000 people.
Wow.
So, it's rare. I wouldn't say it's exceptionally rare, but it's incredibly rare, where a pediatrician wouldn't have been like, test this, test this, test this. It's something that, is just happenstance. And basically, the frustrating thing about this disease is that we have no idea how it got caused. And currently, in addition to that, I guess to backtrack to the surgery itself, the surgery has one of three outcomes. So the surgery can either prolong, basically, and it can basically allow him to absorb nutrients for life. That's the first one. The second one is, hey, it'll allow him to buy him time until he needs a liver transplant. And the third one is he needs a liver transplant basically immediately.
Because it's not going to, like, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work, exactly. So there's one of three outcomes, and basically we're hoping and praying that, 66%, that at least it buys us a few years. But that was what we were told on the first day, and then going into the second day, he went into surgery for 4 hours, and, let me tell you, when you see your 10-week-old son, in a bed, basically, he was on anesthesia, for 4 hours, it's pretty scary. Somebody who you literally, my wife, 2 months ago, came out of the womb, is having major surgery that I or my wife or a lot of people I know never have had. So wow. At that point, coping with this was just, everything was like taking an hour at a time, and it was extremely hard for the first 2 days, when we went to the hospital, we're like, oh my gosh, you need surgery. And then from there, we were kind of just like, okay, let's think about today and tomorrow. We can think about the rest of our life, in the next 4 or 5 days, and hopefully we get home soon. So, it was kind of very much like we needed to kind of slow down and just, hey, what can we do now? And that was kind of how we proceeded with the whole, thinking about it. I would say the hardest moment came, we came in on Tuesday to the hospital. On Wednesday, he went in for surgery, and after a couple days, and he seemed to be recovering, he was recovering well. At that point, I had 4 doctors basically come in, and unfortunately my wife wasn't there at the time, but they came in and basically were like, hey, we have some not great news. And it's not the worst news in the world, but they're basically telling me that, hey, we're pretty sure he's going to need a liver transplant in the next 3 years. So that unfortunately cut out option 1, which is, hey, he can live with it. So essentially, that was a scary moment, and I was sitting there alone with 4 doctors telling me this. And it's an extremely hard thing to think about. Not that, you ever want to think of, any bad outcome, but it's just, your mind does tend to wander towards those types of things. And it's, realizing, hey, I have a son, and I never thought about, hey, I may only have a finite amount of period of time with him. So I would say psychologically that affected us, very hardly, and has definitely changed our outlook on life to a certain degree.
Wow.
So, every day, and every day we kind of, we assess, we move forward, we're hoping from the long run, the way this looks like is that we have about 3 months where we are looking to see if he improves, as far as his color and his skin, how his digestion is going. And the hope is that we're at least in the second, percentile where it's saying, hey, this is working for a period of time. The poor outcome would be, hey, he needs to get a liver transplant immediately, which is not great because, the prospects of liver transplants for a 6 or 8 month year old are very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's kind of where we are at. And I think that luckily we've seen some improvement, but every day, we're living and dying by how he's acting, and it's just a wave of emotions every day. So
damn,
that's kind of what all we've gone through the last couple of weeks.
Travis, man, how are you doing right now?
I think right now, right now I think it's affected me personally to a certain degree where um, I actually, I mean, my wife and I both work, and I've decided to essentially, quit my job to take on, hey, I want to spend time with him. In the position that I have currently doesn't allow me to spend as much time as I want with him. So I will be staying at home with him for a little bit and maybe pursuing something else that is less intense as far as a workload for me so I can spend more time with him, with the realization that I'm hoping he lives like longer than I do. But, obviously with considering recent circumstances, I want to be able to spend as much time with him as I can. So
Hmm.
it's changed our future outlook, and I think that we have both, like, processing it has been difficult, I think. It's odd because every day in the hospital we were just, waves of emotions, and it's just weird to get back to reality, and that, like, this is going to be our reality for a while. Where and what that really means, I guess, to expand on that, is that he needs to go to the hospital. He needs to go to the doctor every couple of weeks, to get checked out. And there's a long list of meds we have to give him. And in addition, we just have to continue to monitor him really closely. And if he has, if he has a fever, we have to go to the hospital for 2 days. So there's certain things that are just extremely, like, we have to be really high on guard as parents to think about. So it's frustrating because you want to see the best in things, but, like, you don't know if your mind's deceiving you, if that makes any
Yes,
sense,
it
because
does.
I'm not an impartial party. If I'm looking at it from a different perspective, I may say the color is this, when in reality it's this, because my mind's like, I'm praying for him to be better.
Right. You're seeing what you
So
want to
it's
see.
hard. Yeah, I'm seeing what I want to see as a parent, I guess I would see, as far as what he's looking like and how he's looking, from our perspective. So,
Well, for those who are listening, what is like your professional background?
so my professional background is I am a certified public accountant. So I work as a controller currently, and my wife does something very similar. So, I mean, for me, it's something that, to be honest with you, that I think is really important for me. I mean, from another point of view, like, I grew up from a background where my parents worked their whole lives, so it was an extremely unpopular decision amongst my parents to do what I'm doing. But I think that's the best. We think it's the best course for our family to do this, and for me to feel like I can spend time with my son.
Hmm. Wow. I mean, it's a major decision to make, and you seem to be doing it for the reasons that are most important to you. Like, you're saying that you're recognizing the fragility of life and not wanting to take things for granted, with trying to be hopeful for a positive outcome, in which your son outlives you, but also taking the very sober look into the mirror and saying that there's a 33% chance, give or take, that your time is limited. And so,
Yeah.
fuck work and all that. When it doesn't matter, you can always work more in your life, but you can never get more time.
Yep. 100%. And that's kind of the thought process. And
Mm,
just, obviously it is frustrating when people who you love, and I guess none of these people who have said certain things to me, not that it's been disparaging any sort of way, but just saying that, you guys can't put yourself in my position, as far as I know. Not many. I mean, there's people in this world who can do such a thing, but I mean, the people who are saying this may not be the best people to judge that, because they can't put themselves in my
I,
shoes, I guess I would
I
say.
heard the best lyrics of a country song, which was, it goes as follows. Um, oh, I'm gonna botch it. Dang it! It's a great setup and then a terrible execution. It's like, um, I need to stop asking people for directions to places they've never been to.
Right.
Don't ask another. Yeah, I'll say it again. Don't ask people directions for places they've never been to, or even further, don't follow the directions of people from places that they've never been to. Like,
Right.
if folks, yeah, the people who are have the most wisdom are those who have lived through what you've gone through, and they can provide the most guidance on, um, best steps versus non-medical personnel or people without lived experience.
Right.
Mm. But
Right.
then there's also the harder part, which is like there's still people who like love you and in their own grief process of seeing you and their grandson or nephew or hey, like me, your friend, my friend's son going through this, wanting uh to like, help, but to feel helpless alongside you. And a lot of folks when they feel helpless, they don't know what to do, so then they do things that are actually more unhelpful than they are helpful, right? Uh, yeah.
That's a really interesting way to put it because I think that, you know, it's weird because like I think I've been fairly open about this process with a lot of people,
Mm,
and it's like maybe I regret, maybe I'm not saying I'm regretting it, but I'm just like, hey guys, I just want to let you know this is kind of going on. And then people are like, I don't know what to do.
yeah.
And I think, like, to me, it's like, shoot, should I have even told them such a thing? Because now it's like they feel guilty and they can't. It's like you guys can't do anything. And it's like it's like people are like, let us know what we can do to help. It's like I don't know what I can do to help. You know, it's just the reality of life right now.
Mm,
So it's interesting you say that because we had so many people wanted wishing us like, hey, in their prayers and all of these things, and it's like, sending us things like let us know if we can do anything, and it's like I mean, unfortunately, you just can't. I just wanted to give you guys some knowledge of what's going on. So
mm,
it's an odd thing when you have, and I think it's really appreciated all the love and support that my wife and I have received in the last couple of weeks. It's just interesting seeing the reaction of certain people to, it's like let us know we can do anything, and I know everybody's like trying to help the best they can. But to your point, some people begin like being not helpful
right.
to a certain degree, and I know to your point, it's like not everybody knows how to. I'm not gonna. Certain people may say, "Hey, you can talk to this person. You can do this." Offering you resources. So it's interesting how people react to their friend or their loved one being
Mm.
in pain like that.
Yes. Everyone has it brings up a lot of people's own sort of insecurities in these times, and um, it's it if anything it shows how many people care about you and how well connected
Hmm.
you are. I try to like frame it in that way when I experienced folks who I realize their attempt to be helpful is unproductive, and I just sort of have to write it off of like they're trying to say that they love me, but they just don't know how to just say that.
Yeah.
Like I love you, man, and
No,
I'm
I
sorry
know.
you're going through that, and I'm with you.
But I don't know. I mean, to your point, like, I think this brings me back to my point is like, and this is maybe an interesting question is like, do you think that it's in a situation like this, like, there's really two options of how do you tell someone and be open about it? And then I've heard the opposite. Let me be quiet about it and let me not tell anybody.
Hmm.
I mean, a good example is like, so my mom went through breast cancer a few years back and she's fine and everything now, but like, she's like, don't tell anybody.
Mm.
And like, that to me is like, I would rather tell everybody so you kind of understand what's going on than, tell nobody and like they're like starting to think about and assume certain things or trying to figure out what's going on. So I don't know the right answer. I'm just saying I've seen different people pursue different paths in dealing with these type of
I
things.
see both, and I can give you a little bit more context or color in some more of the sides. Like everything is a spectrum, and there are extremes on both ends, which are reflections of the same side of the same coin, two sides of the same coin. Meaning, there are people who overshare, and then there are also people who completely never ever share, and they're absolutely isolated, and both produce a negative effect. But
Yeah.
there's a outside of those two extremes, like the folks who are on their phone posting status updates, the doctor just came in and said so and so, and they've like got a whole following and everything about like team so and so.
Yeah.
That becomes a lot to manage. But the reason why they do that is because that is an externalizing of the problem, and it allows the person to distract themselves from the certain situation. Now, rather than focusing on their kid who is chronically ill, They're focusing on their
Hmm.
Facebook group that they're running and managing, and their phone blowing up all the time. So it provides
Right.
an outlet to get rid of some restless energy. The isolation side of it, leads to a complete cutoff of all the resources that a lifetime has provided that person, and then allows it out of a desire to quote unquote not be a burden onto others. And then also, as they say to me, they don't want to get stressed out by other people getting into their business. And so there's that their crux of the issue is a crux of trust. They don't want to trust other people to handle their problem, and also they don't want to. There's a sense of self worth and dignity there that they don't want to disrupt by having other people pity them as they might see, because they might be seen as it being weakness. Um, I've met both folks in the hospital. Um, I think what you're doing, Travis, it sounds like it's an appropriate measure. You're getting connected with your network, with your people, and you're bringing us into your circle, not asking for anything, but simply just to say, "Hey, I want you to know, guys, to know that we're going through this because it's important to us, and now you'll have an understanding of why our behavior might change."
Right. Exactly. You know, I mean, to me, I'm just never, I don't want to try to act like, hey, things are perfect. Not that things are not, things are okay right now. I think that, again, normality is an interesting word to say because what is normal? Normal changes every day, you know,
Hmm.
and normal was different 2 weeks ago than it is now,
Right?
you
That's the
know.
truth.
So,
Yeah.
but
Wow. So the spiritual fitness stuff that we're talking about a lot right now, there's the three pillars, which is like your meaning, how you understand the world, and like sort of your lens by which you view things. Like as you said, we cannot be impartial as parents. Um, then there's purpose, which is like the role aspect, the hats that we wear in life that help give us authority to do what we do. So like your role as dad, your role as accountant, your role as son, your role as husband, your role as friend. And then there's the belonging side, which is all your community networks, your place within your friends, within your family, within your community, within like the globe. And uh, right off the bat, Travis, you're talking about how you're sharing the story openly with your community. So I'm seeing that, and I'm hearing you talk about your story. I gotta say, I mean, I love you, man. You're such an accountant because your story was so freaking like just like by the numbers, like line by line by line. Like here's what happened on this time and this date and this place, and then here's how I did this, and it was 75
yeah.
degrees outside, and I drove 63 miles an hour to the hospital. And I arrived at 7:05, and we talked for 46
Right.
minutes. There were four doctors in the room, you know
Yep.
like that's a
Yeah.
beautiful side of your personality and also your skill set coming out. Um, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to kind of reflect more a little bit on like how it is that you've been able to cope throughout these last 2 weeks. What's been getting you through it? Any core beliefs or any core practices or core people in your life that have kind of helped you through this? Either of those three things? Beliefs, practices, or
I
people.
mean, I would just say, my wife and I's relationship has like gotten a lot stronger. I think we were pretty strong before, and I think this really bonds two people. When you spend 4 or 5 days in the hospital, well, I guess obviously at the birth, but also in this type of situation where you have a loved one who's 10 weeks old. You know, I mean, having her by my side was definitely a very I just don't know how we would have done it without each other, or me doing it without her. I think we both lift each other up. I think we're both very, I mean, we both have moments where we break down and the other one's there to lift one another up. When she cries, I will be there. When I cry, she's there. So I think we're both good about supporting each other, um, in that belief, in that, I mean, to be able to make sure that we are truly connected and making sure that we are thinking about ourselves. Because, I mean, one of the more interesting things, and I'm sure you hear this all the time, Phil, being with people who are with loved ones is the first thing nurses always say is, have you remembered to eat
Yeah.
recently? And
Yep.
like, I think like that was one of the things where I think I heard like 3 or 4 times, and it's like, oh, you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's such like, you're so consumed in what's going on that you kind of forget your basic needs as a person. And, you do need to take care of yourself to a certain point. It's like, I mean, you have to be able to take care of yourself to take care of someone else. And I think like all of that kind of combined, I know this is kind of a circuitous route to say all of this,
Very
but,
good.
you know, I mean, from a core belief standpoint, I think, uh, faith is the biggest thing that right now is like, faith. I won't say like religious faith. I'll just say faith in, doctors, faith in just, everything that we're doing, faith in, that we believe that, our son is meant to do something great, and that, this isn't like just a short term deal. He'll live long, he'll live prosper, he'll do something great.
Hmm.
So I think faith is that's out there as well as kind of a core belief of just saying, hey, you know, he's meant for so much more. And I think that's kind of the belief that I have right now that's kept me going, is that this can't be his story. His story is going to be so much more than this disease. And, him getting a liver transplant, like, I mean, the hope is that he gets a liver transplant in the next couple of years and he can live a long, happy life, you know, but it's going to be a rocky road to get there.
Hmm.
It's not what we were before. And, just the reality is we can't say we have a son who's healthy, normal to a certain degree. And I think maybe we can get there, but it is, a scary thought process to think about, hey, this is what we're looking at in the next few years. But I think all of that said, with all of that being said, you just have to take a day, an hour at a time, and that's kind of a lesson for life too. You know, I think you need to plan to a certain degree, but you need to adapt.
Mm. I mean, it's some wisdom coming from you, Travis. My job as a pediatric hospital chaplain, where I deal with
Mm-hmm.
this stuff day in and day out. I meet you. I'm with you after the doctors leave the room. I'm that guy who walks in and says, "Hey, what just happened?" Um, you know, and I'm the one who walks in after they find out that the surgery was a relief, or I'm with them in the waiting room during those 4 hours. Like, this is what I do every day. And also taking care of the nurses and doctors who are like, man, I got to go tell this parent that, the kidney thing is right. So anyway,
Yeah.
um, and even with my child, who at this point, I mean, God willing, we've been blessed by we haven't had any complications yet. I tell you that I live, Taylor asked me about this actually. I truly do live with like the shadow of knowing of the fragility of life. It's a constant reminder. I mean, my job every day for 8 hours a day, Monday through Friday, reminds me of the fragility of life and how precious it is and how much it is not something to be taken for granted. It's There's so many more important things in life to worry about, um, than and family is one of those things.
Yeah.
I'm hearing you say that this experience has really brought that to the forefront of your mind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For somebody who has been very career driven and who comes from a family who's extremely career driven, um, I think that's something I've always thought about in the back of my mind. And I think it just brought it to the forefront. And I mean, again, I can always go back to work. And luckily, I mean, I have a good background to do all of that stuff. But I mean, at the end of the day, to me, the most important thing is being able to spend time with my son. And, and being able to do that for the next few months and years and for a while, to your point is like, I came from a background where I was working until 3 a.m. for 3 or 4 months of the year.
Yeah, right. Because as an
And
accountant, you've
like,
got tax season and stuff, right?
yeah, exactly. So realizing that, that would be a commitment that I would need to work late all the time, which would inhibit me from seeing my son. So I think that was just really the core thought process of all of this. That, I mean, I'm willing to work hard and do everything that I can for the job, Um, but when you have something like this happen, and I think that the hard part for me is that I I need to be better at almost like compartmentalizing, if that makes sense. Because I I mean, if I'm at work, and I need to get something done, I can be there until midnight or something like that. But for me to compartmentalize and say I have to do this at this time, and when I have work going on, it's been very difficult, I guess I would say, from a different point of view.
Oh,
And I think that I could eventually do that, but my point is right now it's like I want to be more focused on my son than on my work. And I don't want to say, hey, I'm going to do this work, and I end up focusing on my son for a longer period of time. So I think this is an internal battle between work and my care for me as a father, I guess I
right.
would say.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
I mean, I again, my profession. A lot of people who are in my profession think work is the number one thing in life, and
Yep.
that's the most important thing ever. And it's hard for me to do that right now and say and live up to those standards. And I just I have to say no, and I think that's been very difficult for me
Mhm.
in this set of circumstances. And I think to be fair, is like maybe I went to an extreme to say, hey, I just don't think I can give what I've given to you in the past, and that's kind of where I was at from a work
How
perspective.
did your boss
Is
respond to that when you explained to him or her what's going on?
I think he understood because I was open with him throughout the process, just so like I was like, hey, we're in the hospital, I can't work right now, my son's dealing with this,
Right.
and he I think understood, and he's probably been actually the most understanding. I mean, he was much more understanding than I thought he would be. And again, I think he was good at looking at it through a lens of, I haven't been through this before. I can't tell you what the right thing is to do. I totally understand what you're doing. I mean, and maybe I would do the same thing, you know? So he's been actually very understanding throughout all of it, which I think has been great, rather than someone saying, I don't understand what you're doing. And that would make the whole process a lot more difficult, obviously, you know? But he has actually been great.
Oh,
So
that's good.
I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah. Travis, you have revealed, or in your processing, what I'm hearing is like not only is there just like the external stress of like seeing your child sick just in general, and then of course the details of what you're talking about, like that's one thing. However, what's amplified in this current situation is this like internal battle of roles where
Hmm.
your role as father is in this like, what does it mean to be a provider, and what does that look like? And
Right.
suddenly, a lot of these norms that you were saying that you were provided by your parents, your upbringing, and by your career field are being challenged by this experience. And sounds like with what you're saying, Travis, is that it has unearthed, or it's like surfaced within you, a much more deeper, I'll even say like holier, higher value within you of your what it means to be a provider. That role as father means I'm going to sacrifice my professional career for this time in order to um, have more quality time with my children, with my family.
Right.
Is Would
Absolutely.
you, if kind of going off that thread, I can't seem to figure out, or can't put a word to what that value would be of that's kind of guiding this, like under the realm of like meaning. What, you have an idea of what that might be? What is this guiding value that's pushing you,
I
that
mean,
pushed you to say,
I I mean, it's kind of a weird way to say it, but like I would argue maybe loyalty.
okay,
To a certain. I know that's kind of a funky
no, no,
like.
I see where you're
I
going.
mean,
Go ahead.
loyalty. I mean, it, loyalty comes in different facets, I guess I would say. But I mean, maybe loyalty is not the best word, but it's just saying, hey, like I want to be loyal to my son because that to me is more important than being loyal to my job.
Right.
So loyalty, and maybe this is what I've always looked at, is loyalty for me is really hard between two different things to a certain degree for me. Not saying not I can be loyal to my wife, obviously, but I'm just saying, as far as my time,
Yes.
my time, if I'm referring to loyalty, that's what I'm referring to. I have X amount of hours in the day. What do I want to be loyal as far as my time in that time period? So, I mean, I if I spend 12 hours a day at work, I don't have 12 hours with my son.
Right.
So maybe loyalty, um, maybe
I see loyalty. I see what you mean.
but and just yeah, I think that's where I would come from on that. Is that loyalty maybe sounds such like there's probably more emotional word I guess I could use. Loyalty seems so just blank, I guess I would say. But I mean, from my perspective, I personally could not probably live with myself if I worked X amount of hours, 12 hours a day for the next 3 months and not spent time with my son during this time.
Yes.
And I mean, and it's weird because it's like, what do you consider selfish? Is maybe my thought process too. Is like, maybe that's selfish. That's what I want to do, but I think that's also like good for my family. But I think maybe that's one and the same as well.
I mean, everything that you're saying makes sense to me. That I don't think that there's a wrong choice in the dilemma that you're in. Simply, it's just a question of what are you willing to sacrifice. There's a cost that has to be paid one way or another. So what price are you willing to
Right.
pay? And
Right.
also you talked about being married, and Amy, you said Amy also works, and so you also do have the the benefit blessing to where like she's choosing to still work, and then also you can
Yeah,
do some other like remote lighter job if possible.
exactly. So I think to your point, I'm choosing this path, but realizing, this is not going to be easy either. It's not like, I'm going to be sitting at home, like, on the couch for 12 hours a day, and the reality is that like, hey, right now my wife is on maternity leave. She's waking up every few hours to take care of the kid, and I do that sometimes as well, but she's doing the heavier lifting on that right now.
Right.
And it's like realizing, okay, I have to do this, and this every day. That's completely different than what I'm doing right now. So it's a complete 180 from my normal work schedule. So
It sure is.
I I think that I'm in thinking about it. I am nervous because you know right now I'm home when generally my wife's home and we're taking care of the child or of our kid. And at this point, if he's crying too much, like I can say, "Hey, Amy, can you kind of figure this out?" Not that I'm not willing to. She's able to better soothe him at this point than I.
Yes, that's
So
just genetics. That's just biology.
yeah, exactly. So it's like there's gonna be times in 2 weeks when I'm here alone where he may be like having a meltdown, and I have to figure out how to manage that.
Right.
And
Yeah.
just keeping my calm and dealing with it.
Hmm.
And that's something that I'll have to learn in myself to figure out how to do
Oh, yes. Good luck, brother.
that.
Yeah, man. Welcome to fatherhood.
Yeah.
There are many ways up to the top of the mountain. We're all climbing with you, man.
Yeah.
Man. Um, I feel like we're gonna have to have a follow-up episode. Like, pick up in a couple months at the end of this year and check in to
That's
see
fine.
how things go. Because where you're at right now is a real special place. For like the comments that I want to draw out as we begin to kind of wrap this up is the whole point of this podcast has been multifaceted with a desire to um, increase my understanding of this concept that I've been working on, spiritual fitness, to deepen it, but also to eventually create some form of product that is like benefits just regular people. To the person some random person out there on the internet who like might listen to this episode and find some form of comfort or inspiration. You know, maybe there's another Travis out there who just went through something like this, right? And they were listening to
Hmm.
this and they could be like, "Oh shit, there's some other guy like me who's gone through this and he's talking about some things that he's been able to get through to help him, so maybe I can try those things myself." Um, it's also been a desire to really just show how diverse internal resiliency or spiritual fitness is, and then also how they're very similar when you look at it from the broad strokes. Um, but Travis, your story is the first episode that I've had where you're talking about your resiliency in the moment.
Hmm.
You know, man, you're like you're. This isn't something that happened. Like this is
Yeah.
happening.
Yep.
It's ongoing.
Absolutely. It's not like it's. I mean, the reality is, I don't know what 2 months from now looks like. I don't know what a year looks like from now, but it's different than what we are right now.
Right?
You know. So, absolutely.
That is an interesting place to be. To be on a sort of out on a voyage, you know, and not having anything on the horizon except just the hope that and the dogged belief that there better be something frickin' on the other side of the horizon because you're heading that way, whether you like it or not.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly.
Yes.
You know, all we can do right now is hope for the best. And, again, my stuff aside, just hoping everything with my son continues to progress and that, at the end of the day, that, there is some good news as we move forward with all of this.
Yeah. Absolutely. And as things unfold, uh, I want to encourage you to um, continue those good behaviors. The same way that the nurse walked into your room and be like, "Hey, are you eating?" And it's so easy for us
Yeah.
to stop taking care of ourselves. I want to
Hmm.
encourage you as well while you're going through this to continue to take care of yourself in the spiritual resiliency way of, you know, maintaining your conversations with the people who you find most connection with, your parents, your family, your wife. Those can be a good litmus test to realize if you're maybe not be feeling as well as you realize that you think you are, as in you may not realize that you're like, going through like a really hard time. And then you look on your calendar and you're like, oh shit, I haven't called my mom in a month. And we used to talk every
Right.
week. I guess I need to call her. Stuff like that. That can help
Right.
track your sort of overall well being, is seeing how your habits change and if you can do your best to maintain them, especially on the days that you don't feel like it. Especially on the days that you don't feel like it. Those are the most important times to do the things that are good for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And my last little thing is that remember, you're not a burden. So anything that you do ask of
Yep.
your friends in your network, we'd all be more than happy to give you. So I told
Yep.
this
Much
I told this
appreciated.
to Mitch, which is you guys have a similar
Yep.
approach and a similar experience. Let us love you. Damn it.
Hmm. Yep. Yep.
Good. So okay, my last thing I ask all people is the same question. If you could, just in terms of advice or words of wisdom, you're still going through the process, but if you could look back to yourself 2 weeks ago, right when the things started to really unwind, is there anything that you would say to yourself or to Amy that try to comfort or encourage yourself?
I think that I would just say, um, uh, I mean, I guess I would just say, just feel like, trying to figure out the best way to say this, but um, take every moment, and not every moment's a dire moment, if that makes sense. So, like, you may have bad news, but, you can move forward. Like, not every single sign you see is, bad or good. You know, just don't overthink everything is maybe the way I would say what I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Let your thoughts come to you, but don't you can't put your mind through an emotional roller coaster. So, meaning that, like, hey, you can't live and die off of everything that, when he's pooping or when he's the color of him, like stuff like that. Like, we can't live and die off of all of that because we're just going to drive ourselves crazy if we do that.
Yes.
So, like, figure out a way to create some mental stability is my point. And that's, And that's kind of my thought process.
Very good. Travis, thank you so much for being on the show. And for all those listening, tune in next week for another great episode of the Grow Self Spiritual Fitness Podcast.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Yay!